Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back to Change Person episode. And I want to make more time for my dear girlfriend Daylene to share her story with you. So that's why let's go. And my guest today is Daylene. So Daylene, the first thing is you ever share with me before is about your testimony and where you come from. You do not know Jesus before. What is that part of life look like?
Well, I was born in Tucson, Arizona, and I had a large family, 6 brothers and 3 sisters. And we lived in a neighborhood thing, And like you said, I didn't know Jesus till I was 35. My mom and dad didn't go to church, and I think they knew about Jesus, but how you go to school, you hear about Christmas and Easter, and you learn a little bit here and there, but I didn't know, really, did I know Jesus?
Mm-hmm. I know Jesus when I'm 38. Sounds like we are very similar.
Yeah.
I never heard about Jesus.
No.
Yeah, but before you really know Jesus, how your life look like, or your life attitude, or for myself, I don't even know why I'm living for. Do you have those moments of time?
Well, yes, I remember when I was in elementary. It was a hard life in elementary because my mom was a Mexican. My dad was born in Kansas City, Missouri. So we were a mixed family. We were a large family. And I don't think around Tucson at that time, Mexicans were prominent then at that time. Mm-hmm. So when I went to school, I had a rough time. I was shy. I was the 5th child on the chain of 10. So I had 4 older brothers and sister. And so I would be made fun a lot. I was, my hair was very thick at the time, and it was very, very unruly. And like I said, I was shy and, didn't know any better. And, the girls at school would make fun of me. And when I got into 6th grade, even the teachers were taking their side and making fun of me. So I didn't like that naturally. And I became so angry at the world. But then my home life was not any better. I mean, my dad was very strict man. And he worked hard, and he didn't want anything to anybody to know about us or anything. We kept mostly to ourselves. Mm. So when I was going to school, who was I to talk to that they made fun of me, and they laughed at me and they criticized me all the way until in junior high. I said, okay, they're making fun. I'm going to be a bully. Oh. And I became a bully in some way. I became these friends of mine. They were Mexicans. They came from another school when we intertwined between elementary and junior high. That was 7th and 8th grade. We were like a little gang thing with 4 of us only in the gang, but they always told me, go beat this person up so you can belong to the gang. Oh. And I did it.
And you did it.
Because somebody, there was somebody out there that, okay, they're going to like me. They're not making fun of me, so this is a pretty neat thing in my life because, I was never wanted in my school system, and felt so lonely. So when they telling me to do that, I said, wow, this is cool. But I didn't really like it really, because when I fought this one girl, she was a wimp really. I mean, she wasn't even a good fighter. And I felt awful hitting somebody. Mm-hmm. That wasn't really my thing, but I wanted to belong. Mm-hmm. What person didn't want to belong to somebody? Mm-hmm. And so I did what they told me to do. And it was our little thing that we did. But deep in my heart, I didn't really like that. I always say that, you may not know God, but God always knows you, because he always says, I have a plan for your life. And I know that during all that time that he was, I wouldn't say he was making me go through this, but this time in my life, he used it, in the future, And so when I I went through that, there was always that hunger, of love and acceptance and wanting to do better and stuff. But there was never nothing, nobody, ever told me. But then all my friends and my boyfriends, of course, you have boyfriends in 7th and 8th grade, they were all Mexicans and they were all Catholics. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I'll be Catholic. So me and my sister, we went to Catholic catechism. And in 8th grade, we both became a Catholic. It was just a small thing. I really didn't know anything about what they even believed in. There was the word God in there, and then I seen all those statues in there and didn't know what they were for, but I still thought, I was a Catholic. I belong. There's that word, belong, Yeah. So that's how, I learned a little bit about God. But I remember the priest told me, Daylene, you're a Catholic, but it's not because you're a Catholic. You gotta show God's love to everybody. He's the only one that ever said that. I show my love to everybody. They never loved me. Why should I love them? That's how it began, Mm-hmm. So I remember that's the only thing I remember about being a Catholic and going into a church, a cathedral in Tucson. They're very pretty. I would sit there and it just felt so quiet and so solemn. And I really like the prettiness of the cathedral. And in Tucson, we have the white dome. Well, they call it the White Dove in the desert because it's a Catholic church for the Indians because, there's the Indian reservation right close where we were at. And it was all white. And in the desert, you see that for miles and miles. And I always went there too, because they always had functions there and stuff. It was so pretty. But I love going in there and seeing God. I mean, I didn't know about God, but I felt him. Mm-hmm. Even if I didn't know him, mm-hmm. He was there. So then, and of course, then high school came and I left that gang member thing behind, mm-hmm. And my sister and I, we were always so close. My sister is 3 years older than me. And we always hang around each other and we always dated. If I had a boyfriend, I got her a boyfriend and, we always dated and stuff. And that's how my high school was. And of course, I found my true love, as I thought, I met this guy and I fell in love with him. And then when I graduated, we got married. But it was a funny thing that happened because I ran away and got married, so to speak. I had a very, very hard, my mom, she didn't really like us girls because she came from a family of 13 people in her family and 11 of them were girls and they were all bad girls. Not all of them, but they did everything a girl should be doing, but not my mom, and only 2 boys. So she always, liked the boys in the family, not us girls, because she always thought we were going to be doing something wrong, and always doing what her sisters did. So anyways, I had a fight with my brother, fight. Mm-hmm. And so I said, but he started it. And she said, it doesn't matter. You probably did something to make him angry or something. I said, no, Mom, can't you ever take my side? She didn't. So I said, well, I'm going to run away. She said, there's the door. So I took it. I took off. And I walked, my boyfriend's house was like 5-6 miles away. And I said, I was so mad. I began walking. I said, uh-oh, it's pretty far away. It's dark, very dark. But my sister-in-law, she was going someplace. She said, hey, Daylene, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm just going to my boyfriend Roy's house. Oh, you want to ride? I'll take you there. So she took me there, not knowing what had happened, So I said, okay. So she dropped me there. And then I told my boyfriend, I said, can I stay here? This and that. And he said, well, let me ask my mom and dad. And he did. And they said it was okay. And I stayed in his sister's room with her. We shared a room. But my dad and mom didn't think that. My dad and mom called me all sorts of names because I went back home about a week later and got clothes. Mm-hmm. I had to. I had no clothes, just clothes on my back. So they said I was doing wrong and that I was no good and that, they thought, that I was living with him and not being married and all that stuff. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm living in the sister's room, not him. I'm not doing anything wrong, but they didn't believe me, they just thought I was out of the house. I was doing wrong things. Mm-hmm. So we got married a month later. And then when I stayed at his house, I worked. I always worked, even when I was senior in high school. I always had a job. So that was tough getting a job from up there, clear up there, because they lived right off the edge of the reservation. And so I had to have people take me to work, and that was hard. But I still worked, and I told my boss what had happened, and she was a very, very nice lady, and her husband and my brother worked with them too. So they treated me very good, and they made sure that I got to work. A lot of times, and I got really sick one time. Oh, I remember I was sicker. I had the flu so bad I didn't eat for days, and I was just in bed all the time. But my father-in-law at the time, since I was half and half, he always thought I was a gringa. And a gringa means you're the white part of the half and half. And he wouldn't let me make no tortillas. If I made tortillas, he wouldn't eat it. So my mother-in-law said, "Don't worry, we'll make them, and he will never know who made them." So I would make them. He'd eat them anyways, And they lived in a very, very rural house made out of cardboard, outdoor plumbing, outdoor shower, and everything. No hot water, but it was home. I mean, it was someplace I was there. So then after a while, we got our own place in town, and shortly after that, he enlisted into the service. And by that time, I think he left to Vietnam in November, and I was pregnant by then. So here I was, married, pregnant. He's off to Vietnam. I lived in a house. Then my sister, she came over. She stayed with it. She was pregnant too. We were both pregnant at the same time.
Wow. So
then my dad said, "Well, this is no house for my daughters." Because after a while, my dad, he succumbed to, okay, you chose him, not the best way to do it, but he was selling us his old house, which I was raised in. He still had it, so he said, "You buy it," and I said, "Okay." You make payments and all that. I said, "Okay." So me and my sister, both pregnant. We weren't working at the time, and so we both had our pregnancy together. So she had her little boy in May, and I had mine in July. And then I had to tell the service that he was a father and stuff like that, and they couldn't find him because he was deep down in the Nang I think is where he was located at. Anyway, so we had a tragedy in the family. His two twin brothers drowned in a lake, so he got home. And like they said in Vietnam, they ran through a lot of, booms and bangs and bombs and this and that. He was mentally, he had lost a lot of things, and he was not a happy camper. He was very mean, and he did things he wasn't supposed to do. And then his brother died, and that made him more angrier, Here, we had a baby. My sister had her own house, and I had my own house. And so I had the baby, and he came home, and he just wasn't the person that I had married, He was totally different. Yeah. But then I had two more babies then, and he was very abusive. He was very adulterous. And he drank a lot, did drugs, just marijuana though, but just still drugs. And he wouldn't work. He would not work. So then finally, I divorced him.
This will totally change your person, huh?
Yes. The war did, yes. Because I remember every time that it was lightning and thunder, and he would hide under the bed or something, or in a closet, That's the way they were, in Vietnam. They couldn't stand that. And I just figured he was just pretending all that. Didn't know, that it hurt them that bad,
Yeah, but how could you know?
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, at that time, we didn't know what we know now, and neither did they. They never talked about it. He never talked about he had a purple star. I just know that. He got shrapnel from saving somebody. That's all I know, because he never talked about it, So by that time, he got very, very mean, and so I said that I've had enough. So I divorced him, and I told my dad I can't afford the house at the time because, at least he had some money coming in, but my money was not enough. So I had to move with 3 boys, and I moved to another apartment, and then I started working a different job. Had no place to go. My dad helped me quite a bit. My mom and dad, they helped me with food and stuff. But, I was very, strong woman as I am. I said, well, I really don't need a lot of help. I need a little bit of help, which that's what they provided. And my boss, I met another boss that was very good. And I stayed with them for many years. And this was an RV place I worked for. The other one was a surplus store where they sold old Army clothes and Army stuff and fishing and hunting. But this one was RV, where we placed RV materials and stuff. And they were very nice family that I was glad that they helped me too. But we had buses of those times, so I didn't really need a car. So I would take all my little kids, 6 o'clock in the morning, get them dressed, get the bus, change the bus to the daycare center, change the daycare bus. Then I would go to work. That was what we did every day. But
when the time you still not know Jesus, you only go
did not know Jesus. But when my boys, when we go to my mom and dad's house every Sunday, we'd go there. They would go to church on a bus. My mom and dad and my sister and brother. Well, my mom and dad didn't go to church, but my little brothers and sisters, they weren't the same age, but they were like, my boys were only like 2s and 4s, and they were like 8s. So they got on the bus and they went to church. They brought home all this stuff about God and Jesus, and they they really enjoyed it, but still didn't know God. But, there was always that emptiness in my heart that I knew that there was something there. I just didn't find it yet, So then I started working midnights, and I worked at that place during the day, and she got me, the boss got me another job waitressing at night at the Eagles. Just because she knew I needed a little bit of money. Because at that time, tips were good, but waitress was only $1 an hour. So it was just a little extra that I needed. And I rented one of her friends' houses. This was a 3-bedroom, very nice. And then I met this one guy who was from Mexico. Bad guy. And I didn't know him, but I was searching, I was searching for love. And I thought he was a nice person, good looking. And he lived with us for probably only 6 months. That was the worst 6 months of my life, because that was in 1976. My dad passed away from cancer. He had throat cancer. And I got my final divorce in 76, and that was in April. And I met him during the summer. And my sister said, "What are you doing with this guy?" I said, "I don't know." And she said, "He's not good for you." And I said, "Yeah, but he loves me. He loves me." So she said, "But he's not a good person." I said, "Well, I know. Just leave me alone. Just leave me alone. I know." But I didn't know how bad a person he was. He was selling dope, and I didn't know that. He had a lot of stuff on. He was even in jail a couple of times. So I was dumb and, young. And I would visit him, on the weekends, take a bus, go to California, visit him, come back, go to work. My sisters would babysit my boys. So then that happened for a little while, and he got very mean at times with my boys too, and I didn't know that. He also was my babysitter at times. So I needed him, So anyways, I didn't know what he had done to my son until years and years later. At that time that I was with him, my son, he was probably in 1st grade, I think. The teacher said, "Why is he always coloring black?" I said, "I didn't know that. I was so busy working. I really didn't pay attention of stuff like that, I said, "I don't know." So one day I asked my son, what are you playing? Because I want to, Mom. Very mean, very angry. And I didn't know why he was doing it. Because he was such a nice kid, And the other boys didn't say nothing, and I didn't know nothing. And years later, I found out that my boyfriend had raped him. And he said, "But Mom, you should have known." After I found out, he said, "But Mom, you should have known that happened to me." I said, "I was working. I wasn't home. He did it when I wasn't there, and so, so naturally at that time that I found out, I kicked him out, and, He said, I'm not leaving. I said, yes, you are. And he wasn't going to leave for a long time. I said, if you don't leave, I'm going to call ICE. I'm going to call him and send you back to Mexico, because he didn't have no papers or nothing.
Oh, okay.
And he got a gun, and he threatened to kill my boys if I did that. And if I did anything like that, he was, going to kill them. And I don't know how it was, but I know how it was now. He was in jail. He was in prison at the time. Finally, he was away from me. So then I met another guy through the Eagles, and I married him and had 2 more kids from him in Arizona. He was a truck driver. He was a white boy, and I never married or met or been around a white boyfriend. It was always Mexican boys, always. Mm. And it was really different. I said, Mom, should I marry him? My mom liked him. And she said, yeah, I think he should. And my sister said, what's the matter, Daylene? Because he's not Mexican, you don't want to marry him? I said, probably so. Because, just was the way we were, So then I did marry him. And like I said, he was a truck driver. And I had my son. After I had my son, we moved. And then we went to Texas. And then we moved because he didn't like his work. He didn't like the boss, something. So he was going to quit. So we went back to Ohio, where his mom and his brother was at. So we came here, no place to go. Mm-hmm. We stayed with his brother, Jeff and Donna. Then he had a friends. We stayed with their friends. Didn't have a place to go. And that summer we moved again, because he had this bright idea that his uncle was in Oregon and needed some help. He was going to cut wood, and we were going to have some money. He was going to work. He liked that kind of stuff, being in the woods and stuff. So we packed up again, this time 4 kids, on our way to Oregon. We were in a car accident in Wyoming. Hmm. So one of my boys was hanging out of the back of the end of the van, and Ricky, and he was hurt, but he wasn't hurt badly. He still was asleep. He said, "What's going on, Mom?" I don't know what's going on. But the back end of our van was all punched in. So naturally we had to go to the hospital to get checked out. Well, since I didn't have a place to go, and we didn't have no money, they took my kids from me, mm-hmm. other than the boy that was in the hospital, because I stayed beside him. He had a bruised kidney. So the Children's Services took them, and of course, they foster emergencies. Mm-hmm. So I said, as soon as he's done, I'm getting my kids back, because I didn't like that thing. Where's my kids at? My baby's not here, and my other boys are not here. No one was here. And me and my husband, he slept in the van and fixed it so that we could get on the road. So as soon as he was discharged from the hospital, we left to go to Oregon. So then I said, I hope I get my kids back. Sure enough, I did, though. There was not a problem. Thank the good Lord that happened, because that would have been a basket case. Mm-hmm. So we arrived in Oregon, couldn't find his uncle. Oh. No house, no job, no nothing. So we were out there in the woods. I think it was a campground type thing. I'm not even sure where we were at. And no food. But I think he went to the unemployment office, and he got a job one day, brought home some money. So I got some tortillas made, and I got some beans made on the campfire. I don't know how I did that. To this day, I don't know but I do not like camping. To this day, I will not. Anybody says camping, nope, not Daylene. Give me a Holiday Inn. I'll take that. We stayed there, and then he met this guy that had a family, and they had a pop-out camper. The kids could stay in their house, and I and him could stay in the pop-out camper. So then that happened. Then I had my little girl there. Mm. And then he lost his job. He had a really good job. But then the economy, something happened, and he lost his job. So on the way back, we said, okay, what are we going to do? So I called my old boss up in Bullhead and got a job there. Then that's when everything fell apart. My husband wouldn't work, and stuff. So then he called his mom and says, can you help us and this and that. So we moved to Ohio.
Mm.
And still I was a Catholic. I tried to go to Catholic all the time. And so I moved into with his mother, and I said, I want to find a Catholic church and taking the kids to Catholic church. Nobody ever stopped me from doing that. So I couldn't find Catholic church. And his brother and sister, or his wife, went to Assemblies of God in Lisbon. So he said, well, why don't you come with us? We'll take you to church. So we went to church first time. And after that, we found a place. We found a mobile home with all the kids, started going to Assembly of God Church. And then that was 1984. Winter. And in 1985, March was a revival of the church. That's when I got saved. And that's when everything started to change. My marriage didn't get saved, but God was there. So, yeah.
So also you are in the Assembly of God to know your present husband.
Yes. When I divorced the second marriage, I divorced him. Me and my daughter was going to this is on down the road. My daughter was going to graduate. We were going to go back to Tucson. That's where my family was at. My mom and all my sons were there too. So I met this guy from where I worked at. This guy introduced me to Carl and my present husband. And I said, well, I guess I'll go out with this guy. I really wasn't into marriage again. Mm-hmm. So this guy, I met Carl, and he said, well, I'm married. Today is the day that he asked me to marry him. This is the day that he asked me, April 8th.
Aww.
Yep.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah. So then my husband's blind, and I said, oh, now this is something different. But then when he asked me, should I marry him or should I not? In the meantime, my daughter, she met somebody too, so we decided to stay in Ohio. And then that's when I met Carl, and we got married in 98. And God showed us so many things, because Carl is a very patient man. I said, I came with a lot of baggage on that marriage with God. Other marriages, I didn't have God at all. But with this marriage, being saved and working in the church and everything like that, and Carl wasn't saved either. But I said, well, I can't date you until, you got to be a Christian. So he said, oh, okay. So one day he came and he said, I'm going to church with you. So he got saved. We got married in the church, and he loves the Lord, and we talk about God all the time. Awesome. And God is so good, so good. Even when you don't think he's around.
Amen. Mm-hmm. Sounds like your whole story is about God redemption. Mm-hmm. And also is a really so clearly say life without Christ and life with Christ. Mm-hmm. What is the big difference, including in a marriage, in your own mindset, and how you see life? Totally different.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally
and
different.
Then I think your story is encourage a lot of people. They are still searching, and I get married wrong person, and I to draw me into a wrong relationship, but there is still hope. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of hope. And one thing I can witness to you from your life is never give up that hope.
That's right.
Never think I'm not good enough to have a good life, because like you said, it's not a easy path, rough. But when you get with Jesus, everything is falling path, fall into the path.
Into where he wants you to.
Amen.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. It's amazing. I do believe Daylene has more can share with us. But today we are end right here the interview. But if you have a more question or thing she can encourage you, please leave a comment and make sure she will get it. So thank you so much for watching, and remember, never give up that hope.